Sarah's world was turned upside down when an unexpected act of kindness toward a troubled stranger, David, pulled her into a dangerous web of lies, betrayal, and life-or-death choices. As she risked everything to help him escape the grip of a powerful criminal network, Sarah uncovered not only shocking truths about David's past, but also a fierce courage within herself she never knew existed. In the face of gut-wrenching betrayal and relentless danger, she fought for justice, reclaimed her voice, and proved that even the most ordinary people could become extraordinary when pushed to their limits. A story of resilience, redemption, and the quiet heroes among us that resonates deeply with the American spirit. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and tell us what part of the story hit you the hardest. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being here. Sarah sat at her small, cluttered kitchen table, staring at the bills that seemed to multiply overnight. As a single mother with 2 young kids, her life was a constant cycle of work, school runs, and exhaustion. She had long stopped expecting help or recognition from anyone around her. Her friends had drifted away, and at work, her contributions were routinely overlooked. Every day felt like a battle to prove she deserved to be seen, but no one seemed to notice. The loneliness weighed on her, but she had learned to cope with it, finding solace only in the smiles of her children, who still believed in her. Her job as a cashier at a busy supermarket didn't offer much more than long hours and minimal pay. Sarah often wondered what she had done wrong to be so invisible. She had tried to stay hopeful in a world that seemed to move too fast for her. But deep down, she could feel herself unraveling. Her dreams, once bright and full of possibility, had dimmed over the years, buried beneath the responsibilities and the emotional toll of being overlooked. The truth was, she no longer knew how to dream for herself anymore. One dreary Tuesday afternoon, Sarah trudged to the bus stop after another draining shift at work. Her feet ached, and her mind was foggy with fatigue. She barely noticed the drizzle, too absorbed in her thoughts about the mounting problems at home. The world around her seemed to move in a blur, with strangers walking past her as though she didn't exist. Just when she was about to board the bus, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Excuse me, are you okay?" The voice was warm and genuine, carrying a rare sense of kindness. Sarah looked up, startled, to see a man standing in front of her. He was tall, with a friendly smile that seemed almost too sincere for this busy, indifferent city. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years. Someone noticing her, really seeing her. His name was David, and something in his voice made her pause, hesitant, but intrigued. But what would a stranger want with someone like her? David's presence was like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating routine of Sarah's life. As the rain continued to pour, he offered her an umbrella, which she accepted without thinking. They began talking as they waited for the bus. Sarah, usually reserved and guarded, found herself opening up about the stresses of being a single mother, the constant exhaustion, and the overwhelming feeling of being invisible. It was cathartic, yet foreign to share her inner thoughts with someone who wasn't family or a colleague. She was taken aback by how easy it was to talk to him. David listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering words of comfort that felt almost too good to be true. His kindness was genuine, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe there were still good people in the world. But as the bus finally arrived, she realized just how fleeting the encounter would be. She had seen kind strangers come and go before, and nothing had ever changed. This would likely be no different. The door closed with a finality, but something inside her stirred, a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. The bus stop encounter with David kept playing in her mind, leaving her with a strange mix of hope and skepticism. She had grown accustomed to being let down, to life continuing without any real changes. Yet, one morning, she found a small envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "I hope this helps. Don't forget you matter." Along with the note was a gift card for a grocery store, enough to cover the next few weeks' worth of groceries. The gesture took Sarah by surprise, and for the first time in a long while, She felt a warmth spread through her chest. Could this really be from David? She couldn't understand why he would go out of his way to help her, someone he barely knew. But the thought that someone had cared enough to do something so thoughtful filled her with a renewed sense of hope. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this kindness, something beneath the surface she didn't yet understand. Sarah sat at the kitchen table again, looking at the gift card. She hesitated, unsure of what to do with it. Her pride had always kept her from accepting help, but this time, the gesture felt different. It wasn't just about the money, it was about someone seeing her, acknowledging her struggle. With a deep breath, she placed the card in her purse, deciding to use it for groceries that week. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight alone. After all, the encounter with David lingered in her mind, and for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to consider what it might be like to have someone care about her beyond her role as a mother or employee. But she quickly pushed the thought aside. Life was too complicated, and David was just a stranger, a kind stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. Still, his kindness had shaken something loose within her, a reminder that she was not invisible. In a world full of distractions, she had been seen, if only for a fleeting moment. Weeks passed, and Sarah found herself thinking more and more about David. His brief kindness had planted a seed in her heart, and although she tried to push it aside, she couldn't forget the warmth he had given her. On one particularly tough day, when her car broke down and she had to take the bus to work, Sarah found herself at the same bus stop where they had first met. The rain was falling again, and there was an odd sense of déjà vu in the air. To her surprise, David was there, waiting under the same umbrella, just as he had been weeks before. He greeted her with that same smile, and this time they began talking again. This time, their conversation was less about her struggles and more about their lives. What had brought them to this moment? Sarah learned that David was a freelance graphic designer who had recently moved to the city, hoping for a fresh start. There was something comforting in his openness, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she had made a true connection with someone. As their conversations continued over the following weeks, Sarah began to look forward to seeing David. They would talk about everything and nothing, life, love, and even their favorite books. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. David was kind, but he was also mysterious. There were gaps in his story, moments where he would change the subject or avoid certain questions. One evening, as they spoke over coffee, Sarah couldn't help but notice that his demeanor seemed off. It was as if he was hiding something, but she couldn't figure out what. Then, one day, Sarah's world was turned upside down. She received a phone call from the police. A woman had gone missing in the city, and the description of the suspect matched David's. Panic coursed through her veins. Could it be true? Could David, the man who had shown her so much kindness, be involved in something dark? The thought was unbearable. She was torn between her trust in the man she had come to know and the fear that everything she had believed was a lie. Sarah's heart raced as she processed the police officer's words. The missing woman, a local artist named Claire, had been last seen near the area where Sarah often met David. The description of the suspect seemed to match David's height and build. Sarah's stomach twisted as she recalled all the moments when David had been evasive, when he had carefully chosen his words. She wanted to believe that it was just a coincidence, that David was innocent, but the evidence seemed to point in the other direction. Unable to keep the worry at bay, Sarah decided to confront David. She arranged to meet him at their usual cafe, her mind racing with questions and doubts. When David arrived, his face was tight, his smile absent. The tension between them was palpable. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest as she asked, "David, is there something you're not telling me?" His eyes darted around nervously, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might run. But then, something unexpected happened. David's shoulders slumped, and he sighed deeply. "Sarah, I never meant for you to get involved in this," he said, his voice strained. He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. Finally, he spoke again, revealing the truth that had been hidden beneath his kind exterior. David wasn't just a freelance graphic designer. He had once been a part of a dangerous underground network of art thieves. He had walked away from that life years ago, determined to start anew and never look back. The woman who had gone missing was someone from his past, someone he had tried to escape from. The revelation hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. The man she had come to trust, the man who had shown her kindness when she felt invisible, had been running from a past that was far darker than she could have ever imagined. But David's story wasn't over. He was on the run again, trying to escape the people from his past who were now after him. And after Sarah, for getting too close to him. What had started as a simple act of kindness had spiraled into a dangerous game of survival, and Sarah found herself pulled into a world she had never imagined. With the truth now out in the open, Sarah was faced with a choice: turn her back on David or help him. She didn't know what to think or feel anymore. David had been kind to her, but could she trust him? He was asking for her help. He needed to disappear, to keep moving before the people from his past caught up with him. Her initial impulse was to walk away, to protect herself and her children from the danger now closing in. But something in her heart told her that David wasn't the monster he was made out to be. Sarah's thoughts swirled in confusion. She couldn't help but feel that, despite everything, there was something more to David's story. Something deeper. He had shown her kindness when no one else had. Could she really abandon him now, after everything they had been through together? The decision weighed heavily on her, but as the clock ticked down, Sarah realized that she was no longer just a bystander in her own life. This was her chance to make a difference, to choose the path that would define her future, and maybe even save David in the process. The decision to help David was not easy for Sarah. The weight of her family, her children, and her own safety pressed heavily on her mind. But as the days passed, she found herself unable to turn her back on him. There was something about his sincerity, his vulnerability, that called to her. Even with the darkness of his past looming over them, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that, deep down, David was different. She knew that helping him could put her own life at risk, but the thought of him facing his past alone felt like a betrayal. The next day, Sarah made the decision. She met David at a secluded park, away from prying eyes. His face was strained, his eyes darting nervously as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. Sarah could see the toll the past had taken on him. "I don't know if I can help you, David," she said, her voice trembling. "But I won't let you go through this alone." David looked at her, a flash of gratitude mixed with regret in his eyes. The weight of his confession was still fresh, but he had nowhere else to turn. He nodded, silently acknowledging that he was in this, whatever it was, because of his own mistakes. And now, Sarah was in it with him. David's request for Sarah's help wasn't just about hiding from the people after him. It was about trying to right the wrongs he had committed in his past. The art he had once stolen, the connections he had made with criminals, were all tied to a powerful underground ring that dealt in more than just stolen paintings. The people David had crossed were ruthless, and they had no intention of letting him go free. "They'll never stop looking for me," David said, his voice heavy with defeat. "And they'll come for you too, if they know you've been helping me." Sarah's heart raced at the thought of her children being dragged into this mess. She had no idea how deep David's past truly went, but the closer she got to him, the more dangerous things seemed to become. As they worked together to stay hidden, Sarah began to unravel the truth behind the web of lies David had woven. She discovered that his escape wasn't just about freedom, it was about redemption. The people after him didn't just want to silence him. They wanted to erase all traces of his betrayal. And Sarah had become an unwitting part of his plan to make things right. One afternoon, Sarah received an anonymous tip. Someone had seen David in the area. The police were closing in, and she knew their time was running out. Desperate to protect herself and her children, Sarah went to David's apartment to warn him. But when she arrived, the door was slightly ajar, and a cold chill ran down her spine. She entered cautiously, calling out to him. There was no answer. As she stepped further inside, she saw it, David's laptop open on the table, showing evidence of a different life. One of connections to dangerous people, dirty deals, and betrayals she hadn't known about. Her breath caught in her throat. Suddenly, the sound of a car door slamming echoed through the room. Sarah turned, heart racing, to find David standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Sarah, we need to go now," he shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. But it was too late. As they reached the door, two men in black suits stepped out from the shadows, blocking their way. The betrayal cut deep. Sarah had trusted him, believed in him, and now it felt as though she was just another pawn in a dangerous game. The men smiled, their eyes cold and calculating, as they closed in. David's grip tightened on Sarah's wrist as they dashed for the back door, adrenaline fueling their every move. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, and Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel the heat of the men's pursuit, but David's determination kept them ahead. They slipped through a narrow alley, barely avoiding the men who were hot on their heels. Just when it seemed like there was no escape, David pulled Sarah into a hidden doorway, an old, abandoned building. They leaned against the wall, gasping for air. Once the immediate danger had passed, Sarah turned to David, her emotions swirling. "Who are they?" she demanded. "And why are they after you?" David hesitated, his face a mix of guilt and resolve. "I didn't want you to get involved, Sarah, but there's no turning back now. They're not just after me. They're after everyone I've ever known." His voice cracked, and Sarah could hear the pain in his words. "I was part of something much bigger than I ever imagined. And the only way to stop it is to expose everything. But that means taking down the very people who helped me escape." As the days wore on, David and Sarah carefully crafted a plan to bring down the underground network that had ensnared David's life. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on a tightrope. Every decision seemed like could lead to disaster. And yet, she couldn't let go. She was in this now not just for David, but for herself, her children, and the truth. Together, they contacted a journalist who had been investigating the art theft ring for years, hoping that by exposing the criminal empire, they could finally put an end to the danger that loomed over them. The journalist, a sharp and determined woman named Rachel, agreed to help them. She provided them with the resources they needed to get the evidence out to the public, but warned them that it was a risky move. "If this goes public, they'll come for all of us," she said, her voice low and serious. "We need to be prepared for anything." The stakes were higher than ever. With every step they took, Sarah felt the weight of their actions pressing on her, but she also knew that there was no turning back now. This was her chance to make things right, to take control of her destiny and fight for the truth. Everything came to a head one cold evening when David and Sarah confronted the leaders of the underground ring at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was silent, eerie, as though it had been waiting for this moment. The tension was palpable. Sarah's hands shook as she stood beside David, both of them armed with the evidence they needed to take down the operation. They had one shot to expose the truth, and they couldn't afford to fail. As the doors to the warehouse opened, the men they had been running from for weeks stepped into view. The leader of the group, a cold-eyed man named Victor, smirked when he saw David and Sarah. "You thought you could run forever," he sneered. "You can't escape your past." The confrontation was swift and brutal. But as the truth came to light, as the authorities arrived to make arrests, Sarah and David realized that the final blow had been struck. The network was exposed, the leaders arrested, and David's redemption was finally within reach. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle down. The investigation into the art theft ring made national headlines, and David's role in bringing it to light was acknowledged. But it wasn't the recognition that mattered to him. It was the peace he finally found. With the threat gone, David was able to move forward, away from the shadows of his past. Sarah, too, found herself reclaiming the parts of her life she had lost along the way. She had been through so much, but now, for the first time in years, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. Yet, despite everything, Sarah couldn't forget the man who had changed her life. David had shown her what it meant to be seen, to be valued, and though their paths had diverged, she knew that she would never forget the kindness that had turned her world upside down. For both of them, the journey had been long, and the road ahead would still be uncertain. But Sarah knew one thing for sure. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments can change everything. Months later, Sarah stood at the bus stop again, the same spot where she and David had first met. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to peek through the clouds. She smiled softly to herself, reflecting on the twists of fate that had brought her here. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined. She was no longer the invisible woman, lost in the blur of everyday life. Sarah had found her voice again, and even though she missed David's friendship, she understood that their paths had been different from the start. As the bus pulled up, Sarah took one last look around, grateful for the journey she had been on. She stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. She knew that the future was hers to create. Months later, Sarah was thriving in ways she hadn't thought possible. She had started her own small business and was in a healthy relationship. Life seemed to be finally falling into place. But one day, as she walked into a local cafe, she saw a familiar face from her past, David. He was sitting at a table, a contented smile on his face as he worked on a laptop. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. David stood up and walked over to her, his smile genuine. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice warm. Sarah felt a surge of emotions, relief, gratitude, and something more. "It's good to see you," she replied, her voice steady. They exchanged stories about what had happened since their last meeting. They both had moved on, but the bond they had formed during those difficult months was undeniable. Their encounter was a reminder that sometimes life brought people together for a reason, whether for love, redemption, or something else entirely. As they parted ways that day, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle within her. Life had a way of surprising her, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was ready for whatever came next. It was a quiet evening, and Sarah found herself standing at the window of her apartment, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the skyline. She had come a long way since the days when she had felt invisible, lost in the weight of her everyday responsibilities. Now, she was the woman who had found her voice, a woman who had stood up for the truth and helped bring about change. Despite everything she had gone through, Sarah realized how far she had come. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from David. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. "I just wanted to say thank you again, Sarah, for everything. I never could have done it without you." A simple text, but it meant the world. Sarah smiled to herself, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and fondness. She had helped a man find redemption, and in the process, she had found a part of herself that she had almost forgotten. The past was no longer something that controlled her. It was something she had learned from. She had faced her fears, fought for her own happiness, and stood by her principles. And in doing so, she had carved out a life that was entirely her own. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. In fact, she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. As Sarah stood there, watching the city below her, she felt a sense of contentment settle over her. The world had a way of throwing challenges at her, but she had proven that she was strong enough to face them head-on. Life had a funny way of bringing people together when they needed each other most, and Sarah had learned that sometimes it's in the most unexpected places and people that we find the greatest strength. And so, with a sense of peace, Sarah stepped into her new life, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it with courage and conviction. The future was hers to shape.